Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us, for joining Children's Defense Fund Ohio and all our partners for this webinar on ensuring all eligible Ohio families receive their child tax credit. My name is Tracy Nahara. I'm Executive Director of Children's Defense Fund Ohio. And just really quickly, I want to thank all our partners who are joining us on this webinar, starting with Zach Tilley, who's a policy associate from CDF in our national office. And each of these individuals will have an opportunity to introduce themselves more in depth later. Alex Kocha, from a senior policy analyst with Center for the Study of Social Policy. Let's see, Rose French, Development Director with the Hocking Athens Perry Community Action Agency. Melissa Skilliter, Director of Low Income Taxpayer Clinic with Southeastern Ohio Legal Aid Services, and Tammy Lunan, Caring Economy Organizing Director with the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. So we are going to speak to you a little bit about the child tax credit, what it means for Ohioans and their children, and also, what are some of the challenges and how can we get through some of those as individuals are trying to access those benefits. Now, Children's Defense Fund as an organization, we champion policies and programs that lift children out of poverty, protect them from abuse and neglect, and ensure their access to appropriate and targeted healthcare, quality education, and a moral and spiritual foundation. To support children and families in Ohio, we work to improve healthcare access, health outcomes for children and families, stop the push out of students from our schools due to zero tolerance school discipline practices, create a juvenile justice system that rehabilitates our youth and reduces recidivism, and build a high quality and stable early child care and education system. And we also do this by harnessing the statewide and national CDF youth and community networks that we believe change the lives of children. So that is our why in terms of why we are doing this. A couple other things that I'd like to share with everyone who is participating and joining us today is that in the state of Ohio, and we just saw this recently through our kids count report that came out this past week on indicators of child well-being. Children throughout the state before this pandemic, they were on an upward trajectory, slow, but it was upward. About 1 in 5 children, though, were experiencing poverty and the daily violence that comes with that in terms of hunger, housing insecurity, family instability, the stress of not having your basic needs met. And, during this pandemic, as we saw many families losing their employments and with it, their health insurance. And with that, their inability to, provide for some of those basic needs. These are situations that we know can have a lifetime of negative outcomes and negative impacts on children and the communities in which they live. Programs like the child tax credit can go a great deal or a long way in terms of mitigating these harmful effects of poverty and not having basic needs met. And I would like to mention that in two previous sets of legislation at the federal level in the 90s, there was bipartisan support in creating child tax credit. Now, my partners on this call will talk a little bit about why this goes further and also how it's different than what we currently have. But I think that one thing that we can all agree on is that the benefits of the child tax credit on children and their lives is much greater than whatever cost it might be. And I think most recent costs were around $100 billion a year to implement this. However, we realize almost $1 trillion in benefits from children not living in poverty. And a program such as this will reduce child poverty in half. At least those are the estimates and the research that has been done. So at this time, I am going to introduce and actually pass it over to my colleague, Zach Tilley, who's a policy associate with Children's Defense Fund, and he is co-chair of the Automatic Benefit for Children, or ABC for short. and I will let him introduce himself. So Zach.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Zach Tilley. I work in the National Office of the Children's Defense Fund in Washington, D.C. I'm on our policy team. I work primarily on tax recently for the past year or so, but I also do some housing and work on economic and racial inequality as well. So here we go. I'm going to talk just a little bit broadly about what the child tax credit is. So generally speaking, the expanded child tax credit is a cash benefit for families with children. As Tracy mentioned, this program, the child tax credit, has been around for several decades, but the effectiveness of the program was really limited by some poor policy design up until the American Rescue Plan passed in March. So previously to the passage of the American Rescue Plan, the child tax credit was only available to families with earned income. So unless you made at least $2,500 working a job, you couldn't get anything. And then the lowest income earners weren't eligible for the full value of the credit until they earned something like $25,000 or $30,000. So the result of that policy design was that 23 million children, the children most in need, were left out of the child tax credit. And that's one crucial change that was included in the American Rescue Plan. The earnings requirement went away. And so this program is now newly available to all 23 million children who were previously excluded. Some other key improvements to the program were the value of the cash benefit increased substantially to $3,600 per child aged 0 to 6 and $3,000 per child aged 6 to 17. That was up from a maximum of $2,000 per child previously. The other crucial change was that as opposed to distributing this money as a lump sum at tax time every year, the American Rescue Plan allows for this money to be paid out in advance in monthly installments to families. So those roughly come out to $250 per year for kids aged 6 to 17 and $300 per kid aged 0 to 6. And those monthly payments are currently scheduled to run from July of this year through the end of the year, barring extension of the program into the future. And we've seen those monthly payments already happening. The first was in July. The second was a few days ago on Friday, the 13th of August. If I could just go briefly back to the last slide. Sorry about that. Just the section on why this is important for families, just to reiterate. This program boosts family economic security. And we know from a story that came out last week, based on the data from the Census Pulse Survey, that the first round of child tax credit payments has already reduced the rate of food insecurity for families with children. So it's already having a really big impact on families' economic security. And it also reduces child poverty and advances racial equity. So Tracy mentioned the figure of this program projected to cut child poverty in half. We saw another analysis from the Urban Institute a few weeks ago that shows similar finding. The CTC combined with some of the other economic pieces in the American Rescue Plan are combining to have a really, really substantial, make a really substantial reduction in poverty broadly, but child poverty especially. So now we can go to the next slide. So I just want to run through some questions that we hear pretty frequently about the new child tax credit. This is not an exhaustive list at all. This is just a few that I pulled out because we hear them a lot. So what do I have to do to get the child tax credit? Most families, about 90%, are receiving these benefits automatically. So this is families who have filed taxes within the last 2 years or received one of the stimulus payments over the past year and a half or so. If families in those groups don't have to do anything to receive the benefits, those payments are going to bank accounts on file. For families who are not connected to the tax code, didn't receive the stimulus payments, they are able to sign up for the child tax credit through what's called the non-filer portal. which you're going to hear quite a bit more about later, or they're still eligible to file a full tax return to receive their benefit. In July, for the first round of monthly payments, around 59 million and change kids received the payments automatically to begin. The number of children who have received payments in August went up by about 1.6 million, which is good news. It suggests that the IRS is doing a good job of finding kids who are eligible for the benefit and doing a good job signing more kids up. But obviously those efforts need to continue. Another question we hear a lot is, does receiving the child tax credit make me ineligible for other federal benefits? Importantly, no, that's not the case at all. Tax credits don't count as income for the purpose of determining eligibility for other federal benefits. That's a message that we've been stressing a lot. We think it's super, super important. We've heard from all kinds of folks on the ground that this is a concern that comes up a lot because people are very wary about accepting new resources that could potentially endanger other benefits that they get, but this does not do that, and you can stress that. Can my advance payments be reduced if I owe child support payments, back taxes, or other federal debts? No, the CTC payments can't be intercepted like that. Depending on your state, maybe other non-government entities, debtors may be able to garnish CTC payments, but that is that's a possibility, but that's something we're working on legislatively to fix going forward. And then another question that we hear a lot, and a concern that a lot of people have, obviously, is, will I have to pay back this benefit? We would like to be able to say to people, no, of course not, but we can't completely say that right now. So what we have to say is it's possible, but it's unlikely. So in the event that the IRS accidentally issues you a larger benefit than you're entitled to, you may be required to pay some or all of that back. There is a provision in the law that protects families earning up to $60,000 from repayment in most cases. So that's called a safe harbor for families in that income range. Families earning up to twice that safe harbor amount are partially protected, but we're really working hard to make sure those protections are more robust going forward. So there's a link in the slide that you'll receive later pointing toward our full FAQ document. I will post a link to that in the chat right now. If you have additional questions, you can put them in the chat and we can get to them during the Q&A, or they may be addressed in the link that I just sent. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to sort of shift directions and talk a little bit about our work at the federal level. So as Tracy mentioned, the CDF National Office is a co-chair of a federal a coalition called the Automatic Benefit for Children Coalition, along with the Center for the Study of Social Policy, where Alex works. You'll hear from him next. Our mission is to advance a robust child allowance for every kid in the country, to promote racial equity, to fight poverty, and serve as a foundation for a more equitable and inclusive social support system. So right now, our coalition consists of maybe 70 or 80 federal groups, federal advocacy groups who are fighting hard to extend and improve the child tax credit. We are also, we also have some state and local groups who join our meetings, are part of the coalition, and they're really a valuable resource for us to know what's going on the ground, and a good vector for us to push out resources to communities. So we have a link to the sign-up form for the coalition here. You'll all receive this later, I guess, as part of the slides that get sent around. But if you are interested in learning more about our coalition work, or potentially joining up with us, please, you can get in contact with me. You can fill out our form and start to join our meetings. We'd love to have you. We work on a whole range of issues, from policy design to legislative advocacy to outreach in communities and communications and publicity and all sorts of things. So one more slide for me. Just a little bit more information about the legislative work that we're doing, what needs to be done to make sure this program is, can extend out into the future and can be the best possible program for our kids. So what we're working on, number one, is permanency. This program, unfortunately, is set to expire after this year, after 2021. So those monthly payments are set to stop after December 2021 unless something else is done. We're pushing very hard to have a permanent CTC included in the upcoming budget reconciliation bill that Congress is working on, but that fight is ongoing. We're also trying to make the program as inclusive as possible. So right now, for example, 1 million kids who don't have social security numbers are excluded from the program. It used to be the case that kids with taxpayer identification numbers were able to get the child tax credit. That changed in the 2017 Republican tax bill, unfortunately. Another set of kids who are excluded, there are 300,000 kids who can't get the child tax credit because they don't satisfy what's called the qualifying child rules under the tax credit. Basically, they either live with a distant relative or a family friend, and that relationship isn't deemed sufficient by the IRS for some reason. We want to change that and make sure those kids can get this credit. And we're also pushing for robust protections against overpayments and IRS clawbacks to make sure that families can be sure that they're not going to owe any money back to the IRS at the end of the year, because we think that's extremely important, not only obviously for the financial well-being of those families, but for feelings of security and the popularity of the program and ultimately the political future of the program too, because we want this to be popular, we want this to be useful for families, something that no one has to be afraid of because of the danger of clawbacks down the line. So with that, I think I've sort of exhausted my time. I don't want to go too far. I'm passing it on. I believe Alex from CSSP is next, and yes, he is, and he can introduce himself.
Great, thanks, Zach. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Kocha from Center for Study of Social Policy. I'm a proud brief CDF Ohio alum, so it's really good to be with you all today. So I'm just going to talk briefly about what this means for Ohio families with children, go a little bit into the non-filer portal, and then a little bit on outreach strategies. And picking up on the CTC permanency advocacy that Zach talked about, the ABC Coalition recently did a sign-on letter calling of state and local groups calling on Congress and President Biden to make these expansions permanent and fully inclusive. We received over 700 signatures, over 70 of which were from Ohio groups. So a lot of support from you all in Ohio, which is fantastic. So what does this mean for Ohio families with children? Well, we have a sneak preview because payments have already started to go out. The payments that went out in August covered 2.1 million children in Ohio. It was over $546 million with an average benefit of $436, which is above the national average. Despite the fact that it has reached so many Ohioans, we still know that there are some who are left out and who have not received the benefits automatically. There are estimates of over 2.3 million children in Ohio being eligible. That's very likely a lower bound. The Department of Treasury has provided some data which gives us a sense of who some of these kids are. So there's close to 60,000 Ohio children who have health insurance. So they show up on a 1095 form, but they have not been claimed on either a 2019 or 2020 tax return. And there's also potentially 57,000 newborns in 2021 who also were born with Medicaid coverage and not receiving this. Also missing from this group, uninsured children who are not on tax returns, immigrant families whose children have Social Security numbers, but the parents have not necessarily claimed them yet, and then recipients of other benefits like Social Security who might have used the stimulus payment portal, but did not necessarily claim their children as dependents on that portal. Next slide, please. But we know that it's important to reach these families because we've already been able to see what the benefits look like. This is not Ohio-specific data, this is national, but we can already see the trends. This is from the Census Bureau Household Pulse Survey. We see that lower income households pay off debt and spend more of the amount. And when they spend, it's food, it's utilities, and it's clothing that are the top three categories. As Zach said, or as Tracy said, I think there's already been a decrease in food insecurity amongst families with children. In the last 2 weeks, we saw it drop 3 percentage points. So we know that we need to get folks signed up who are not already signed up. Next slide, please. Because the economic benefit is real. In many ways, especially now that we see the food insecurity impact, it mirrors SNAP benefits a little bit in the fact that these are consistent. Folks are able to spend them pretty quickly and locally. And so the impact on local communities is huge. The Niskanen Center, which is a DC think tank, has estimated some of the economic impacts for Ohio over 12 months. Net CTC benefits via this expansion, 3.6 billion. State and local sales tax revenues, 71 million, and nearly 20,000 jobs that are supported. So if this is continued, if this is made permanent, based on what we know about investments in early childhood, other benefits are going to accrue. As Tracy said, we'll save nearly $1 trillion that will be generated through economic impact of higher educational attainment, higher earnings. But we need to make sure that we can address the barriers to people who are not able to sign up. Next slide, please. So you don't need to take, most people receive this automatically, but you need to take action. If you are required to file taxes, but have not done so for 2019 or 2020, and if that's the case, you file your taxes. If you want to update your address or banking family information for the IRS, or say a child changed locations, then you use the CTC update portal, which there's a link to later in this PowerPoint. But in the case of non-filers, if you don't have tax liability, you're not required to file taxes, and you didn't provide your information about your dependent children in the IRS stimulus check portal, then you use what's called the non-filer sign-up tool, which I'll go through in a little bit. Next slide, please. So who we're most worried about in terms of not receiving these benefits are parents and caregivers with very low incomes, no tax liability, maybe those who are self-employed. These are people who are going to be hardest to reach to get signed up into the tax system. We also know that those who don't speak English as their first language, there are going to be barriers in terms of using the non-filer portal, at least at the outset here. Limited access to the internet, insecure housing. These are going to be reasons that people are not able to receive the advanced CTC. We also know that from Columbia researchers that likely those who are non-filers, nearly 3/4 are probably receiving some other benefits like Medicaid or SNAP. So there at least is some connection to those families. Next slide, please. The barriers are in some ways twofold. There's awareness barriers to signing up. People who are maybe confused about the tax language think it's not for me. The fact that there's a focus on messaging on working families and the tax code and think, oh, this is not necessarily for me. A lack of knowledge about the benefits themselves, thinking that you don't necessarily meet the relationship test that Zach talked about when in fact you do. And especially around mixed status families. If parents, if the children have Social Security numbers, the parents, even if they have ITINs, can file on behalf of their children. But there also might be distrust of the program, thinking it's a scam, skeptical about unconditional benefits, or fears about having to pay something back, like Zach talked about, being audited or data being shared. These are fears that folks have already been sharing as barriers to signing up. Next slide, please. There's also going to be access barriers. The sign-up portal has had glitches. There's been difficulties using it. The general tax filing barriers, either the cost of tax programs, lack of access to free filing help, or not having access to financial services like getting a cash check, check cash, or a bank account. Language barriers, lack of computer access, or those who are unhoused. But the IRS did make a sign-up tool for non-filers, which hopefully will be able to allow people to sign up, and that community-based organizations really have a role in helping folks get signed up. Next slide, please. So what you need to complete the form: you need a computer mobile phone with internet access, your full name, social security number or ITIN, and then the social security numbers of your qualifying children, an email address, date of birth, bank account info if you have one, otherwise you'll receive a check, and then your mailing address. And what's really important here is that if you're unhoused or you don't have a permanent address, you can ask your local shelter or service provider, or you can use a trusted friends or relatives. So the form itself, if you have all of these available, takes about 15 to 30 minutes to complete. And there are a lot more detailed walkthroughs that I'm going to provide links to that you can go through. I'm just going to hit the highlights here because sometimes just seeing the pages really helps. So this is the first page, right? You can see that there is some language capacity there for it to be translated. It tells you who should use the tool and who should not use the tool in case you actually have to file taxes. And then what you need, which is what I just went through. Now, the next page is the kicker here. So after folks click the blue thing at the bottom of the first page, the sign up page, you'll be brought to what looks like a scam. And there have been a lot of people who drop off at this point because they see that they're no longer on a government website and they think that this is not where they want to input the information. This is, in fact, the correct site, freefillableforms.com. So you'll see this page and you'll have to click Get Started to move on. Next slide. You then create an account. You have an email address, user ID, phone number, which will help you reset your password if you need it. Next slide. And then on the first page, this is where you enter the filing status. There's only two options, single or married filing jointly. If you normally file as head of household, in this case, you would file as single. Then you put your full legal name. If you go by Bob, but it's Robert, it needs to be Robert. You then put the social security, ITIN, your home address, and then the dependents with their social security number and the relationship to you. If you leave the bank account information blank, then payments will be mailed to you. And generally, you only use the PIN protection if you've been experienced identity theft and you would have received that from the IRS. The second page then has where you actually personally verify. Generally, it asks for your adjusted gross income. If you're typically a non-filer, and if you were a non-filer last year, you have no tax liability, you enter 0 in that box. You then pick a 5-digit PIN for your electronic signature and a date of birth. You don't necessarily need to do the driver's license or state issued ID because this is essentially a federal return. And so is less important to actually have the state information there. Next slide. Then you'll verify your email, make sure that people check their spam boxes as well to make sure that they've been able to access it. Next slide. You'll get a confirmation that it's been confirmed. Next slide. And then you'll have to go prove you're not a robot, sign off to say that you have submitted this faithfully. Generally, it says 24 to 48 hours. People who have been helping folks with this a lot say that it's around 30 minutes of when you get it, but to not panic if you get confirmation up to 48 hours. If it gets rejected, there's resources at the end of this PowerPoint that can help you walk through it. Next slide, please. So these next two slides, these are resources for really in-depth walkthroughs of the tool. So I highly recommend going to them. And sitting through. This is a YouTube video, and then the next slide has a number of links for you. And then the final slide is where I will end. And this is really what we've been seeing kind of broadly state and local agencies, as well as community organizations do to ensure that folks get signed up. State and local administrative advocacy, really important. Groups can work with state benefit agencies, especially in this case, Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services and Ohio Department of Medicaid, to send information to their clients saying that they might be eligible if they have children and that this does not count against federally funded benefits. They can incorporate that outreach into existing activities, whether it's the pandemic EBT communications pipelines, on benefit websites like TANF, and in phone calls with clients. They can also use resources, state and local resources, American Plan, Rescue Plan Act resources to help with those campaigns. And then community-based organizations here, they're really going to be the trusted messengers, trying messaging around expanded benefits for children, because the tax language, the tax credit language might turn people off, but it really is an expanded benefit for children. Using the back to school moment as a potential opportunity to connect with early education and care providers, connecting with public institutions like libraries to help folks with computer access, and then when it's safe, door knocking in particular areas we've seen as potentially important. So the rest of this PowerPoint has a lot of resources. We'll send it out around later, and happy to take your questions. I'll pitch it back to Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And at this time, we're going to pass it on to Rose French, who's the Development Director at the Hocking Athens Perry Community Action Agency, or HAPCAP, who's going to talk about their activities to promote CTC and ensure eligible families receive it. So Rose.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So Hocking Athens Perry Community Action is a multi-county, multi-service social service organization. We provide services like home repair, energy assistance programs, Head Start, transportation, employment. But we're also somewhat unique as a community action agency because we also operate a food bank, the Southeast Ohio Food Bank. So collectively, our reach extends along the entire southeastern corner of the state, which is part of the Appalachian region in Ohio. As most of you know, it's an area with a lot of really wonderful natural resources, but it's also quite economically distressed, and there's a lot of poverty here. Most of our programs and services here at the agency are designed to help folks who are struggling financially. And so we recognized really early on how powerful the enhanced child tax credit could be for the people we served, and decided to really put some effort behind spreading the word and doing outreach. We also know that given the population we interact with, anecdotally, we know that there's a high number of non-filers, but also folks who face a lot of those barriers that Alex pointed to. Next slide. So I'm just going to run through some of the things that we've done over the last couple of months to spread the word, and starting with social media. So we have a pretty significant social media following, relatively speaking, especially on Facebook. And we have found this to be a really good medium to reach community members, especially through COVID. And so we've done a good amount of social media outreach regarding the tax credit, including creating some of our own like branded graphics that are branded like our HAPCAP style with those colors and so on, because we really wanted some materials that were perhaps like less intimidating than some of the materials that were coming out from the IRS. And so we've been pushing that information out. But we also worked alongside our partners at the Ohio University Credit Union in Athens to host a Facebook Live event several weeks back. And this was an opportunity for us to share general information about the tax credit, but also to provide a forum for people to ask questions. Now, like, of course, we made it clear that we weren't offering individual tax advice, but folks were able to ask questions around some of those like trickier head of household questions, or questions again around public benefits and how this may or may not impact their access to benefits. And we had a good number of people attend. It was a fun event. And I also found it interesting that in addition to having folks come and ask questions, and people submitted questions in advance, we also had some other helping professionals who attended and who just wanted to learn more about how they could spread the word to the folks they serve. So we had people attend that event from WIC and from the local libraries and so on. So social media has definitely been a good way for us to spread the word. Next slide. And in addition, a couple of months back, our local paper, the Athens Messenger, one of our local papers, ran an op-ed we submitted written by the person who heads our child development division, or our Head Start director. We thought she would be a really good messenger around this. And this letter that went out was a surprisingly big success. It was like among the top read stories for a long time on their website. It circulated quite a bit. And I think some of that was we've really tried to be very straightforward in our messaging. So you can see that the title on that and on our flyers is monthly payments available for families with children. And so clearly that really resonated with folks. You can also see in the middle here on this slide, we branded some nice flyers, and we've been distributing those at community events. Those are like general information flyers. And like an example of that, you can see on the far right here, a picture. We've been doing these large scale mobile food distributions through COVID, where we pull up a truck at a fairgrounds, and they're really effective ways to efficiently reach a lot of folks to get food out. But we're also using these as a way to get information out about community resources. And so we've been circulating these flyers at those events. And I think this is also a great way that we're reaching some folks who are potentially otherwise pretty socially isolated. So that flyer is something we're able to continue to get out to community partners. We're getting it out to libraries so folks can get it up on their doors, on their walls, or whatever it may be. And then this is also information that we're sharing through we have like a weekly email blast that goes out to all of our staff, but also to a pretty sizable list of other helping professionals all across our region. And so we're continuing to push this out, make that flyer available, and so on. And then finally, I wanted to mention that, anytime as an organization, if we're putting information out about a resource, we always want to make ourselves available to help folks access that resource. It's important to us. So through a relatively new initiative at HAPCAP, we've hired 3 community resource navigators who are tasked with just that. They're there to help people kind of navigate this complex web of social services. And so we made certain that our resource navigators had access to good, high quality, reputable information on the child tax credit. They have watched some of those navigator trainings, I think, that were available through the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, or I believe that's the group. And we've included contact information for these resource navigators and everything that we have pushed out. So when we put the letter to the editor out, we made sure to say, hey, call us if you have questions. It's on all of our flyers, all of our messaging around the tax credit, to make sure that folks know they can call us if they need to. And that's especially important in our region. We have large swaths of the region where broadband is just not available, right? And so if people need somebody to help them walk through that portal, we would be available to help them do that. And I'll leave it there. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Rose. And I apologize, Rose Freck. I put an N in there and made you Rose French. Sorry about that, Rose Freck. Next, we're going to welcome Melissa Skilliter, Director of Low Income Taxpayer Clinic for Southeastern Ohio Legal Services. So thank you, Melissa, for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I was very happy to see that this event was occurring, and concur that it's such an important resource for families that anytime we have a chance to talk about how to help people get those, I'm happy to be here. Like I said, my name is Melissa Skilliter, and I'm an attorney with Southeastern Ohio Legal Services. We are the free legal aid service that covers 30 counties across Southeastern Ohio. And we overlap with the counties that Rose Freck's organization covers, and then go both north and east from there. I am the director of our low-income taxpayer clinic, and what I do on a day-to-day basis, I help people who have tax problems before the IRS. So we're not a free filing site, we're not a VITA site. We are specifically tasked with helping people fix problems with the IRS. Typically they owe money or have an examination or need assistance. And so you can imagine we've been pretty busy with all of the complications that are going on with the IRS right now. We spent the early days of the pandemic, basically March, April, and June, trying to get information to people about the stimulus payments and help people use those non-filer portals. And that effort really informed the efforts that we made with regard to trying to get information to people about the child tax credit. And so we tried to take the lessons that we learned there and try to tailor child tax credit outreach efforts to make sure that we were getting the information where it needed to go. And so we tried to first look at those people who may not have gotten the information about the stimulus payment or needed different information now that the child tax credit was in play. Some of the challenges that we faced with regard to getting that message out to people, like I said, I'm a tax attorney, so typically I'm talking to people who file tax returns, and we found that people really take on sort of the identity of a non-filer. And so where the information that, if the information was that you needed to file a tax return, people would say, oh no, but I don't file, I'm not a filer, I'm a non-filer. And so it was really important to do quite a lot of outreach and education to make sure that they understood that getting that non-filer form submitted, which is really just a very basic 1040 to the IRS, is how they access both the stimulus and now this benefit. Also, people are not really distinguishing between this program and the stimulus payments. And so lots of times when we're talking to people, they'll say, oh, the next round of stimulus. And it can cause some confusion because there is a little bit of a difference between who can get funds under the stimulus payments. You didn't have to have dependents for that. And these are really only available to families that have those qualifying children. And so they also, because it's sort of viewed as being part of the stimulus effort, that they don't necessarily dial in on the fact that they may need to take action now where they may not have before. We're also, and some of this is somewhat repetitive from previous speakers, and particularly Alex, we're finding that some people really just think it's too good to be true, that when we're trying to talk to them about it, that we may be scammers, or that, again, that they're going to have to pay it back. And so we talk a lot about it being an expanded benefit, and that it's designed to help families even if they don't have income, or even if they weren't a beneficiary of the child tax credit before, to make sure that they're understanding that that this is something that can benefit them. We've tried to focus on families in particular that, like I said, would have needs that were not addressed by the stimulus payments. One of the things that was great about the stimulus payments is they were paid out to people who received federal benefits like the SSI, SSDI, and veterans benefits to the adults that received those benefits, but they didn't get the payment unless you filed either a return or a non-filer form for the dependents. And so we've really been trying to reach out to people who have those benefits and have children in their home as well, to make sure that they understand that they need to take action in order to get the portion as it pertains to the children. We've tried to reach out to families that have children in kinship care. And so particularly grandparents who are caring for their grandchildren. And there's a lot of confusion there on behalf of families. First of all, when it's grandparents caring for grandchildren, they have that required relationship that was discussed earlier. And so you don't need to have a court order. It doesn't need to be official legal status. It's where the child was. And at this point, with that non-filer form or for a tax return, you're looking for filing returns that cover 2020. So you're looking at where the child physically was for more than half of 2020, as opposed to any legal status when it comes to sort of close family members, grandparents, aunts and uncles, and the like. Frequently, grandparents that are taking care of their grandchildren allow their children to claim the grandchildren even though the child wasn't with them. It's their sort of way of either not interfering or trying to help get some resources to their child. But now that there's this ongoing payment that's supposed to be for the benefit of children, we're trying to encourage people to go ahead and claim those dependents that they rightfully should be able to claim. Families with new children, and so I would include in that newly born children, but also adopted or children that have just moved into their home, to look at whether or not they may be able to file a return now or next year to claim that child tax credit. And then, of course, underserved populations, ESL populations, while not as much of a significant number of ESL population in my Southeastern Ohio counties, those folks particularly do need information about who qualifies and assured that they are rightfully claiming something that their family is entitled to and should have the benefit of for their children, if that is the case. So again, my program covers Southeastern Ohio, so broad outreach. We cover 30 counties is somewhat difficult. So we've tried to focus on using our networks to make sure that we get information into the hands of people that can benefit. So of course, we've done significant outreach to our existing client list, trying to comb through and identify those who we're already working with that have a child in the home and may be able to benefit from the child tax credit. And having one-on-one conversations with those folks by their attorney or our local staff about how they might be able to benefit for it. We're doing a lot of social media as well. With the pandemic, the need to try to sort of broadcast information to our clientele and our community partners is extremely helpful. So we also did a Facebook Live, and we've done a series of posts that, again, we have also tried to make a little bit friendlier than the IRS branded information. I think that people tend to scroll past the IRS stuff, and so we're trying to sort of talk about families and help for families and use that side of terminology as well. And then we've also really tried to make the most of our community partners and make them aware that this is something that where their clients might be able to benefit for it. Like I said, there's a concern by a lot of people that that the program is either too good to be true, or that the people that are trying to help them access those funds are too good to be true. There is a huge amount of people out there, bad guys trying to get their hands on other people's either stimulus or child tax credit payments. And so where you can have people with good, solid, reliable, ongoing relationships with families to help reinforce and provide this information. And so we've tried to work a lot with places that have some level of caseworker support for families, whether that be DV shelters or Job and Family Services or homeless shelters, any of those mental health providers who can have information either in their lobby or provide it to their clientele, and again, sort of tread on those existing reliable relationships. And then kinship care supporters. And so we've worked with Ohio Can to try to get information out to out in places where people who are providing care for their family members and their children can get information that they need. And so I was going to talk a little bit about challenges, and some of these have already been mentioned, so I'll try to wrap it up. But because it is a one-year program, it's hard to sort of get the information where it needs to be, when it needs to be. There's a lot going on right now, and the information is sort of coming out in a rolling fashion from the IRS. And so what we knew during the filing season is a little bit different than what we know now. And so there's, to the extent that folks that are interested in providing help to the child, people who could benefit from the child tax credit, to work with organizations like mine and HAPCAP and the CDC to make sure that the information that they're getting is up to date, is helpful. In Southeastern Ohio, we have a ton of people that don't have access to the internet, as well as older folks and others that are not comfortable using the internet. And so they're reliant on organizations to help provide assistance in getting that filed. And of course, you can send in something in paper, but it's taking a very, very long time for tax returns on paper to get processed. And so if at all possible, submitting these online is really, really necessary. Another thing, speaking of portals, that's really confusing, there's the non-filer portal where you can actually submit the information to get the credit. And then there's also the update portal where you can report to the IRS that changes in your household, or update your address or your payment information. There's sort of, and then there was, of course, the stimulus payment portal. So people are pretty confused about that, although there is there are a homepage on the irs.gov that sort of directs them where they need to go. But to the extent that people can get help signing onto the portal or submitting it themselves, that's really helpful community service there. One thing that's a challenge, if people do need to report changes from their 2020 or 2019 filing information, there's an ID verification process that a lot of people find a little bit tricky. The IRS has put out new technology, well, new to them technology for allowing people to get signed up that doesn't require as much of as much of a challenge as the old way was. And so particularly low-income people, particularly people who move or may not have access to a valid ID, have a real difficult time actually getting signed in to make updates. And so they could also use assistance with that. And then of course the filing season is over right now, and we had tried to, as much as we could, get information into, and we tried to get information where it needed to be during the filing season, but of course it's over now. And so there's still a very, very wide need to get help for people in filing using that non-filer portal. And so I know that there's efforts through community partners now to recruit volunteers to provide that service as well. And so I'm sorry, I did go over my time, and I'll pass it along to the next presenter.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And we're going to, pass it on to Tammy Lunan, who is the Caring Economy Organizing Director with the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. So welcome, Tammy.
Greetings, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to join in on this call. I realized that, in the interest of time, I'll be pretty brief. Rent, food, childcare, clothes, it's never been more expensive to raise a family and just get by. Expanding tax credits, part of Biden's COVID relief package, is something the OOC and our partners have been fighting for. And now we're pushing for it to be more inclusive and permanent. Join us as we make people aware that their family may be eligible to receive the child tax credit, and rally support to make this monumental expanded credit permanent. We must let Congress know that the pandemic or not, working families still need to make ends meet. Now is the time to go bigger and bolder on income support. Next week, both the House and Senate are expected to be in recess. This week, the House and Senate are both expected to be in recess. Next week, August 23rd, the House will return for a day or two to pass the budget resolution. During the August recess, with the reconciliation instructions set by the budget resolution, staff from the relevant committees will draft portions of the reconciliation bill. This is our opportunity to ensure that this legislative text reflects our priorities and maximizes spending on our priorities as well, included the child tax credit. The OOC will definitely be conducting actions, meeting with members of Congress, using social media, et cetera, to lift up the issues Congress should prioritize and pressure legislators to do the right thing during our week of action. We must make Congress hear us in order to fix the systemic issues that made us so vulnerable to this crisis in the first place. We need to expand and extend cash assistance benefits like the child tax credit and the EITC permanently. If you are an advocate for children and families, I'd love to connect with you. Again, we're going to be a part of a week of action, August 22nd through the 27th. And then there's going to be an additional week of action around September 2nd through the 8th that week. So we definitely like to connect with you so we can figure out how to get you plugged in to the work that's going to be moving, that's going to be crucial and beneficial to families all across Ohio. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Tammy, and for all the work that you're doing. and the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. We're so fortunate to have you in our corner and in the corner of families and children throughout the state. So I know we're at time. However, I do want to make space for us if there are any questions from any of our attendees. And, perhaps we can, if folks are available, stay on for a couple extra minutes so we can address any questions that might be there. Okay, and I would also say that if there are anyone or any individuals in the audience who's viewing this who would like to connect with any of the speakers that have been featured today and the good work that they're doing, either at the local level, state level, or at the national, I would invite you to please reach out to Catherine Unger at KUNGAR@childrensdefense.org. Her email is in the chat. Please reach out to her directly or to any of the individuals that have spoken today to get your answer or your questions answered. Okay, it looks like we do have a question here. What does the expanded CTC and the American Families Plan look like? And how can we get involved in the effort to make it permanent?
I think that question might be for me. I think what we've been proposing right now is that it be extended at least for the next 5 years. And so if you're interested in being a part of it, we definitely would love to connect with you. We are looking to lift up several meetings with members of Congress, including Sherrod Brown, as the child tax credit is pretty much, the provisions for it was pretty much his language that he wrote. So we're going to be leaning on certain folks in Congress so that they champion this during this time. So we definitely like to connect with you.
And I'll also say at the federal level, the Automatic Benefit for Children Coalition is doing a lot of legislative work pushing for permanence and other changes to the program, improvements to the program as well. So if you want to get plugged into those efforts, you can, like I mentioned before, fill out the sign-up form in the slideshow that's going to be sent around, or you can reach out to me by email and we can get you plugged into that work.
Okay, there's a question about any key OOC priorities for the week of action.
The priority is just to lift up the child tax credit. We've been working to really connect with the impacted and cultivate those stories, right? So I think one of the things that we really want to do is get some of those stories out there from folks that are receiving benefits. They're receiving benefits, what that impact is like. It's really about lifting up that narrative, because that's the biggest thing that we can do is lift up what the impact is for the families. And so that's one of our key issues. In addition to that, we also really want to target some of our Congress members so that they are also with us and do the right thing as they are going to be working on the budget resolution.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but again, this webinar was recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel, and also I'm sure it'll be on Facebook. So please reach out to the individuals who are featured here today if you'd like to get more information about the work that they're doing and how you can engage. And we appreciate everyone joining with us. Thank you so much.